Alright, let's keep this momentum rolling, because now we're diving into one of the most visceral, brutal, and deeply disturbing villains in horror history. First hint, this character's defining trait is not only their physicality, but also their weapon of choice, which is loud, mechanical, and instantly recognizable. Second hint, their face is concealed not by a traditional mask, but by something more grotesque, a covering literally made of human skin. Third hint, they're not just a lone killer, but part of a twisted cannibalistic family that preys on unfortunate strangers who stumble too close to their home. Fourth hint, the location tied to this character is rural, isolated, and suffocating, filled with the stench of decay and the hopelessness of no escape. Fifth hint, their kills are frenzied, brutal, and often clumsy, which paradoxically makes them scarier because it feels more real, more raw. Sixth hint, the original film they appeared in was marketed as being based on true events, which added a layer of myth and terror that has haunted audiences ever since. Seventh hint, the sound of their weapon roaring to life is enough to send shivers down the spine of any horror fan. Hint, culturally, this character represents a primal kind of fear being, hunted like cattle by someone who sees you as nothing more than meat. Ninth hint, sequels, remakes, and reboots have all tried to capture the essence of this character. But the original image of them swinging their weapon in the sunset remains iconic. 10th hint, of course, it's Leatherface from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and if you didn't get that one, you need to brush up on your slasher history. Let's pivot to someone who combines urban legend with supernatural vengeance. First hint, this character is deeply tied to folklore and myth, their name whispered as part of a ritual that dares you to summon them. Second hint, the defining visual of this villain is a hook for a hand, glistening and deadly, a tool of both legend and punishment. Third hint, bees are often seen buzzing around them, a symbol of their tragic backstory and the horrific violence they endured in life. Fourth hint, their narrative is rooted in themes of race, class, and injustice, making them not only terrifying, but also layered with social commentary. Fifth hint, their story plays out in urban settings, particularly involving mirrors and the act of saying their name aloud. Sixth hint, the franchise they belong to was revitalized recently with a modern sequel that tied their mythology to contemporary issues, proving their relevance endures. Seventh hint, their demeanor is calm, deliberate, and almost sorrowful, contrasting with the brutality of their kills. Eighth hint, culturally, this villain is both feared and respected. A figure who has transcended horror into the realm of folklore. 10th hint, you already know it's Candyman, and if you got that right, congratulations, because not everyone dares to speak his name. But let's get trickier and bring in a mastermind. Someone who doesn't get their hands dirty in the traditional sense, but orchestrates horrors that push victims to their breaking point. First hint, this character is associated with elaborate traps, mechanisms designed to test their victims' will to live. Second hint, they don't appear as a hulking figure with a blade, but rather as a weakened man, often close to death themselves, which makes their control over life and death all the more chilling. Third hint, Their voice is iconic, delivered through a puppet with red spirals on its cheeks, who delivers grim instructions to the doomed participants. Fourth hint, their moral code is twisted, okay? Not to kill directly, but to give victims the choice to survive if they willing to sacrifice something significant. KT. Fifth hint, the franchise they belong to became a staple of 2000s horror. Known for gruesome creativity and moral dilemmas. Sixth hint, the traps range from simple to grotesquely elaborate, but always symbolic of the victim's supposed flaws. Seventh hint, culturally. This character tapped into the zeitgeist of audiences who wanted something beyond simple slashing, something psychological and gory. Eighth hint, their phrase, "I want to play a game," has become legendary in horror circles. Ninth hint, despite their physical weakness, they manipulate events from the shadows, making them all the more terrifying. 10th hint, of course, it's John Kramer, better known as Jigsaw from the Saw franchise. Now, shifting from mechanical nightmares to supernatural curses, our next villain is a figure defined by water, vengeance, and an image that still gives people nightmares. First hint, this character is a young girl, or at least appears that way, with long dark hair obscuring her face. Second hint, her movement is jerky, unnatural, and often accompanied by the sense that she is crawling directly toward you, breaking the boundaries of the screen. Third hint, she is tied to a cursed videotape, an object that dooms anyone who watches it to die within 7 days. Fourth hint, her death was tragic, tied to betrayal and violence, leaving her spirit restless and vengeful. Fifth hint, the visual of her crawling out of a television has become one of the most iconic horror images of all time. Sixth hint, the franchise has Japanese origins, adapted into American cinema, both versions terrifying in their own right. Seventh hint, water imagery constantly surrounds her appearances, a reminder of how her body was disposed of in life. Eighth hint, culturally, she represents the inescapable reach of technology as a medium for curses and fears. Ninth hint, her presence is felt less through gore and more through dread, a creeping inevitability of doom. 10th hint, of course, it's Samara from The Ring, or Sadako if you're referencing the original Ringu, and either way, she's unforgettable. Let's keep the supernatural theme going, but move into the modern indie horror era, where a single entity terrified audiences with its metaphorical weight. First hint, this character isn't defined by claws, knives, or hooks, but by an ever-present, looming shape in a story about grief and motherhood. Second hint, they originate from a Buka children's book that becomes something far more sinister when read aloud. Third hint, their design is shadowy, long-fingered, and insect-like, with movements that are sudden and inhuman. Fourth hint, their power is psychological, preying on loneliness, despair, and mental illness as much as physical fear. Fifth hint, the movie they belong to became an instant modern classic, praised for blending horror with deep emotional resonance. Sixth hint, their presence is felt in whispered voices, scratching sounds, and that unforgettable catchphrase tied to their name. Seventh hint, culturally, this character became a symbol for anxiety and depression, showing how horror can embody real-life struggles. 8th hint, unlike traditional villains, defeating them isn't about violence, but about acceptance and resilience. 9th hint, their image has been memed, analyzed, and embraced as one of the best examples of modern horror design. 10th hint, you guessed it, it's the Babadook from The Babadook, the pop-up book Nightmare that became an unexpected queer icon in internet culture. But don't worry, we're not leaving creepy dolls off this list, because the next character is one that sits silently yet radiates pure malevolence. First hint, this villain isn't large, doesn't speak, and doesn't move much on screen, but their presence is undeniable. Second hint, they are tied to a real-life paranormal investigation duo. Their story spun into a cinematic universe that has terrified audiences worldwide. Third hint, their design is deceptively simple. A porcelain face, a pigtails, and a vintage dress. But their eyes suggest something much darker lurking inside. Fourth hint, unlike Chucky, this doll doesn't wisecrack or chase victims, but instead manipulates the environment, spreading fear like a virus. Fifth hint, their first appearance was in a film that wasn't even theirs, but they became such a standout that they got their own spin-off franchise. Sixth hint, their lore is tied to demonic possession, a conduit for something far older and more powerful than a toy. Seventh hint, culturally, this character tapped into our primal fear of dolls, giving audiences nightmares about inanimate objects coming alive. Eighth hint, their appearances often involve subtle movements, eerie placement, and slow-building dread. Ninth hint, the glass case they're locked in becomes a symbol of containment, always raising the question, what happens if it opens? 10th hint, of course, it's Annabelle, the doll from the Conjuring universe. And she's proof that silence can be just as terrifying as screams. And since we're in the Conjuring universe, let's not skip one of its most striking villains. First hint, this character is defined by their habit, their pale face, and their piercing yellow eyes. Second hint, they appear as a demonic nun, a perversion of something sacred, turning faith itself into a source of fear. Third hint, their story intertwines with hauntings, possessions, and ancient evil, expanding the mythology of the cinematic universe they belong to. Fourth hint, their design is unforgettable sharp features, shadowed robes, and a smile that suggests cruelty. Fifth hint, their origins are tied to a Romanian monastery, where the boundaries between our world and the demonic were dangerously thin. Sixth hint, culturally, this character became an instant hit, even inspiring memes and viral reactions to their terrifying jump scares. Seventh hint, their presence is often heralded by shadows, silence, and a sudden burst of malevolent force. Eighth hint, the religious imagery surrounding them amplifies the fear because it feels like a direct assault on comfort and faith. Ninth hint, sequels and spin-offs have delved deeper into their lore, solidifying them as a pillar of modern horror. 10th hint, you already know it's Valak, better known as the Nun, the demon who turned prayers into screams. Finally, let us end this round with someone who doesn't come from the mainstream studios, but has still carved out a massive reputation in recent years. First hint: this character is defined by a clown costume, but unlike Pennywise, they don't speak, they don't shapeshift, they just kill. Second hint: their makeup is stark black and white, exaggerated into a ghoulish grin that feels both cartoonish and deeply wrong. Third hint: they rely entirely on silence, using body language and expressions to convey sadistic glee. Fourth hint: the violence they commit is extreme, pushing the boundaries of gore and brutality in a way that shocked even seasoned horror fans. Fifth hint: they first appeared in a short film before growing into a cult franchise that thrives on underground buzz. Sixth hint: culturally, this character represents the raw, unpolished side of horror, proving that sometimes indie creations can be scarier than studio productions. Seventh hint: their kills are creative, shocking, and often linger uncomfortably long, making the audience squirm. Eighth hint: their black and white design makes them instantly recognizable, even among the crowded field of killer clowns. Ninth hint: they've quickly grown into a convention favorite, beloved by fans who crave something extreme. 10th hint, of course, it's Art the Clown from the Terrifier films. And if you guessed that one, you deserve a standing ovation, because he's one of modern horror's boldest icons.